Welcome back to From Middle Class to Millions. I want you to know that he is unofficially finished with high school. And now it's time for the 529. All right, so what do I mean by that? He's unofficially finished with high school. So in my town, the high school students the seniors have to volunteer for 20 hours a week from the end of May, like a couple weeks before Memorial Day, right until the end of June, leading up to their senior prom and their graduation. And the idea is so that, we can create some decent citizens who give back to the community. So they decide a little earlier on in the year where they're going to volunteer. It has to be approved by the school. And then, of course, they have to write a little report at the end and submit it. I don't know if anybody ever looks at the report. The idea is to get them out into the world 20 hours a week. Also to get them out of the school, because by this time these kids have been accepted into college. The ones that are going into college, they've been accepted at this point, and I guess the school figured, we don't want these guys around anymore. They're not paying attention anymore in class. Are they really learning anything? They already know they have the grades. They've been accepted. They know where they're going in the fall. So why keep them around wreaking havoc in the school when the 9th, 10th, and 11th graders are still working their butts off and they don't have the security of knowing what the next chapter is going to be in terms of post-secondary education? So I think it's something that the school board decided, or the high school decided, and they're like, you know what, we can also create some decent human beings, some decent citizens. Hopefully they can create some good into the world and they can volunteer. So that's pretty much it. School is done in terms of doing any more classwork. And as of Monday, my son has been volunteering at a local elementary school, actually the elementary school that he attended when he was, from kindergarten through 5th grade. And it's kind of cute because the principal that's there is the same principal that was there when he was there. Some of his former teachers are still there, which is kind of adorable. And actually some of the middle school teachers, they've shifted them around. So some of his middle school teachers have moved over. So he's just having a good time. And then there are also some other high school students that are volunteering there as well. So it's fun. And he's there every day. I think he's there from 9 to 2 or something, or around those hours. So it's a good 5 hours a day, Monday to Thursday, and then they're off on Fridays. And that's pretty much the gig if you did the volunteering at the school. So he loves it. Him and his friend have a tutoring business. So working with kids is not new for him. Usually he's with the 5th graders, and he's had a couple of 5th graders that he tutors, but he also tutors middle school students as well. So, working with kids for him is fun. He's also worked at a camp before a couple summers ago. So this is right up his alley. So he's having a really good time. But that's not what this episode is about. This episode isn't about my younger son. This episode is about the 529. And I want to go back and talk to you about when I opened it, why I opened it, what I was thinking at the time. Why did I decide to even open the 529? Because there's so many options available to you if you're deciding to save for college for your kids, and how much to save, how much you're going to contribute, how much you're going to help them. And how do you do that when you're also saving for all the other things that are out into the future and paying for everyday expenses in the here and now, right? So it's really difficult to manage all of these competing priorities. And that's a lot of what I do with my clients, trying to figure out, okay, how much do I have to put aside for these various things? How can I go about doing that? How can I do that and pay for things that I need right now versus something that sometimes somebody's thinking about is 18 years out from where they are versus retirement that could be even further out. And then you're like, yeah, but next year I know I'm going to need a new car. How do you do all of that? So I do want to give you a little background on how I manage that, but I also want to talk about what the 529 is, which is this college savings account, and how you can utilize it, or if whether or not you even want to utilize it. And then I want to also touch on that pressing question about what if you don't use the 529? What if your kid doesn't go to college? What if you have this bolus of money sitting there that you've been saving for all these years, and then you realize, hey, this kid is either not college bound or has decided to do something completely different. So I do want to touch on those things as well, but I don't want to make this too long, but I want you to get the essence of it. All right. One of the main things that I want to talk about with the 529 is that college savings for me was a priority. The thought at the time was that my kids would most likely go to college. Both me and their father went to college. And, you know, even though the times are changing a little bit now in terms of, is it really necessary to have a college degree? At that time, we were still in the mode of, yeah, it would make sense for you to get your undergraduate degree, to get your 4-year degree, to get that foundational degree. And I always thought that college was something, it wasn't something that was necessarily going to get you a job, right? Because that was the thinking for my generation, even though college graduates still make significantly more than people who do not go to college on average. And there are tons of stats that support that. However, I really believe that college was a place where you learned a little bit more about how to start to ease into life on your own. Now, don't get me wrong. It is also the place, if you're lucky enough, where you get to live on somebody else's dime, go to school, hang out with your friends, live on your own, and really come into your own being with the significant support of somebody's finances, right? Whether it be, yes, you have a student loan or your parents are also helping you, whatever the case may be, it is that opportunity. And it can be a really great period of your life before you go into full-fledged adulting. So I was of the mindset that, okay, these kids are going to go to college. It's really important to support them in that venture. And if I am equipped, I will be able to provide them with some financial support, because I know coming out of college without these huge student loans would really give you a leg up in life. But college savings was not the priority. It was a priority, but it wasn't the priority. And I wasn't going to shortchange my own retirement to fund their tuition. And the reason why I say this is because I still know that they could get loans to go to college. I can't get a loan to retire. If there's no retirement money, that's it. Like, I can't borrow to fund my lifestyle. That is not going to work for retirement, particularly if now I'm no longer working. Isn't it a little bit more difficult to get a loan when you're not working? Of course it is. And there aren't retirement loans per se. So I knew that college savings was a priority, but it wasn't going to be the priority for me. So I had this crazy notion that there's going to be other ways that I can do this. And even if I couldn't fund the whole college experience, I would try to fund as much as humanly possible, but not at my own expense for my own future. Now, a lot of people find this controversial because, you know, there's the thought that you should do everything for your children. And I was doing everything. I was doing everything to support them, but not at my expense. I remember once I had this individual that I had spoken to. She wanted to talk to me about working together. And she said she had drained all of her 401k to put her 2 children through college. And her eldest child was now out of college and having a really difficult time finding a job. I don't recall what he did, what his degree was in, or what he was looking for, but he is having a really difficult time finding a full-time position, and he'd been out of college for a few years. And her younger child was in college, and she didn't have as much money left over from the 401k to fund her education, so the younger child also had to take out loans. Now, what was interesting about this is she said, well, look, now I don't have a 401k. Like, I've drained it all for these kids. So the expectation is that that they're going to have to, you know, support me in retirement. And I was very surprised by that because the kids didn't know that that was going to be the deal. Like, they didn't know that because she had made this decision, unbeknownst to them, to drain her retirement fund, that now they were going to be responsible for taking care of her in her old age because she had no money left. And I wonder if the children had known that this was going to be their responsibility, if they would have been so gung-ho to take all that money willingly versus take on a student loan. Who knows? Now, I don't want anyone to walk away from this thinking that the best deal for them is to drain their 401k to support their kids through college. Again, that does not work. Kids can take out a student loan, and I'm not promoting that they take out these huge loans, but I know that you will not even have that option in retirement. So this is why that was so important for me to think about, how am I going to be able to fund this for these guys? How am I going to be able to support them, yet still ensure that I am not going to be dependent on them later? I am not going to be a burden to them later because I put all my eggs into their college basket. So I came up with some other ideas at the time, and I just to, not to go totally off track, but I had considered purchasing real estate. And so along my journey, many of you know that I bought real estate and I invested in real estate. And I always thought that, okay, if this 529 thing doesn't quite work out, if it doesn't amount to as much money, and this is very early on in my investing days, so I wasn't quite sure how this stuff worked. And so I thought, well, if it doesn't quite work out, if it doesn't quite make it, I will have this real estate and I can sell some of these properties and I can use the proceeds from the properties to help fund their education. So I also had this backup plan. Right? I said, okay, I'm going to diversify my portfolio, and my entire financial portfolio wasn't just going to be, okay, saving for retirement, saving for college, and that was it in these two vehicles. I also thought, well, why don't I use some of my money to invest in real estate as well? And I can use that real estate later if this 529 money doesn't amount to as much as what I need it to be. So there were a lot of things that I was doing in that sphere and that time of my life that was really about looking ahead. Now, I want to be clear. I was looking ahead. I knew that, okay, I wanted to, one day I would retire. I knew that one day these guys may go to college, but I didn't exactly know how I was going to make it happen. And I think that this is so important for folks to hear, that sometimes you have the idea, but you may not have the concrete plan. And so I had the vision about what, in terms of what I wanted to accomplish. I just didn't have the plan and all of the tools in place to make it happen. Now, that doesn't mean that I didn't find out which tools were needed and I didn't learn, but it took a long time because, again, at that point, things weren't so readily available, right? And I didn't know anybody who had done all of these things. So I didn't have access to somebody who could say, here, set it up this way, do this, 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 and this. It would have saved me a ton of time, which is what I do for my clients. They'll tell me, look, this is what I want to accomplish, even whether it's in a year or 30 years. And then I can help them map that plan out so that it's not so disorganized in their brains. It's not so intimidating that they're like, I don't even know how to begin. And then they shut down and they don't do anything. In fact, it's quite the opposite. I help them calculate out, how much is it that you're going to need? This is the vehicle that you can use to make it happen. Let's start mapping that out. And we do that for every pillar and silo and goal and target that they have. And so I did that with college in mind. And I said, okay, there are a couple of ways that I can do this. These are the ways that I'm going to implement it. And let's see what happens. So now here we are, second kid, going to school. And I'm like, all right, I put money towards the 529. And the 529 worked out. I don't have to sell my real estate entities to fund college. However, that was the backup plan, right? And that backup plan is going to pan out in a different way, which I'll get to later. So let's talk about what the 529 actually is, okay? Because I keep referring to this 529, 529, and it's like, why are you listing off these three numbers? A 529, okay, is a tax advantage savings account for education expenses. And the number 529 comes from the section of the IRS tax code. So it's section 529 in the IRS tax code. So that's why we call it a 529. Basically, the way that it grows is all the contributions that you make to the 529 go in after tax. The money in there then grows for the period of time tax-free, and the withdrawals, the qualified withdrawals, so the withdrawals for the education are also tax-free. So it's a double win. The money goes in after tax. So you've already paid taxes on it. That money then goes into your 529. You invest that money. That money then grows tax-free. You're not paying any taxes on it while it's growing. And when you take it out to pay for school, you can also pull it out tax-free. Okay? Anyone can open one of these accounts. So you as the parent can open it, a grandparent can open it, an aunt, an uncle, a family friend. You don't have to be the parent. And I have clients who will open up these 529s, and especially in the younger years, they'll say to folks, listen, don't buy me toys. Don't buy stuff like this for my little kids. Take that money instead and put it into their 529. So if you're going to buy me a $50 noisemaker, I'd rather you put that $50 into this child's 529 right now at the age of 1 and just let it ride. That's something that a lot of my clients have done. And it's just that extra contribution that's working towards their child's education instead of stuff that's probably going to end up in a landfill, right? So the limits to what you can contribute in the 529, there aren't any. There are no limits. You can keep dumping money in there year after year after year. But the annual gift tax exclusion is $18,000 per person as of 2024. That has changed every single year, right? So there is an annual gift tax exclusion. But there's also a super funding option. So you can front load 5 years at a time without triggering a gift tax, which is kind of impressive, right? Now, I don't know anybody at the time, or I didn't know anybody at the time who can do that. But I do know now a lot of clients who are setting themselves up for that level of generational wealth where they will be able to front load for a niece, a nephew, a grandchild, even a child at the rate that they're going. Okay. So what does the 529 pay for? It can pay for your tuition, your fees, your room and board, your books, any required supplies, computers, iPhones. It can pay for all of this stuff. It can also pay for K through 12 tuition up to $10,000 a year. Now, depending on, where you are, the type of private school maybe your child goes to, $10,000 isn't going to pay for much. But for some, it pays for everything. For those really expensive private schools that are $40,000, $50,000, $60,000 a year, it's still something. It's still something, but it's not going to be, a tuition-free go. All right? And they also pay for some apprenticeship programs. So that is also something to think about. So even if you know that your kid isn't college bound, but they may want to do a trade, that's also money that could be used to pay for these types of programs. Now, there are a lot of state plans, and every state has at least one of these 529 plans, but you're not obligated to use a state plan. A lot of the times people use the in-state plan because they might get a deduction on the contributions on that particular plan. But you don't have to use your state plan. You can use one of the national plans. It doesn't matter. All right. And most of the plans, have these kind of target date funds. So similar to your 401k, where there's a target date where they think you're going to retire. Well, they have a target date till the day the child's going to graduate from high school, right? So you can do that where these target date plans, which are more age-based, right, portfolios that shift to more conservative holdings as the child gets closer and closer to college age. Similar to how the 401k, they start putting more and more bonds, more and more of your money goes towards bonds, the safer bet, right, as you get closer and closer to retirement age. You don't have to do these age-based plans. You can, again, go in and pick something that you believe makes the most sense for growth for your investment. So you could go in there if offered in the plan and pick a low cost, broad-based index fund, just like you may do in your brokerage account, just like you may do in your IRAs or your 401ks. It's entirely up to you. So you do have a lot of flexibility there when it comes to investing in these plans. Now, what keeps a lot of people out of the 529 is, what if my kid doesn't go to college, right? What if I already know my kid isn't college bound, but I know they may do something, but I'm not 100% sure. I don't want to lock up all of my money into this thing. And so I want you to know that there's some options to this as well. The reason why I still encourage people to put some money into the 529 is, especially if they have more than one child, is because this is an investment, right? And there's a long term. And if you're starting from birth, then this child has about 18 years of growth. So there's a lot of time. And we always talk about time in the market, not timing the market. Well, there's a lot of time, 18 years, for this money to really compound. So even if you think your child may not go to college, or not sure of exactly what your child may do, this is still an opportunity for you to have some growth of some funds. And you can change the beneficiary. If you're saving this for child number one, and child number one doesn't end up going to college, well, then you can transfer the account to another family member. It could be a sibling, it could be a cousin, it could even be you as the parent. The definition of family member is really, really broad. So they're not like, oh, it has to be someone in the immediate family, in the nuclear family. No, it's pretty broad about the transfer of the money. Like I said, trade schools and vocational schools count. So it doesn't have to be a 4-year university. You don't have to get a bachelor's degree. It's eligible for pretty much any school that's eligible for federal financial aid. They can use 529 funds. Also, apprenticeship programs, like I said, anything registered with the Department of Labor, they're now a qualified expense. So again, even if they don't go to a 4-year university, this is another opportunity. And it can also be used for student loan repayment up to $10,000 lifetime per beneficiary. So that's another thing. If you are like, hey, you've taken out some extra money and then there's still some 529 money that's growing in there that has been contributed, that's available to you, you can use that to pay down towards some student loan debt. Now, this is pretty new. But starting so we're in 2026, I think it's 2024, the Secure 2.0 Act has decided that after the account has been open for 15 years, you can roll any of the unused 529 funds into a Roth IRA for the beneficiary, for the child. So let's say you funded this thing and you've paid into it, and now you've paid tuition and room and board and all the expenses, and there's still some money left over. After 15 years, you can just transfer that into a Roth IRA for said kid. And that's up to $35,000 lifetime. So yeah, it's subject to the annual Roth contribution limit. So you can't just take whatever, say you have $20,000 left over. You can't just dump that $20,000 in one go into a Roth. You've got to break it up depending on what the contributions are for that year. So if 2026 it's $7,500, well then you can only put in $7,500 of that $20,000. You got to wait until next year to put in the next $7,500 or whatever it is for that year. But now you're funding their Roth IRA. So the money that you would have used for college is now good for them for a retirement account. So it's not the worst case scenario. The money isn't trapped. So I don't want people to feel like, oh my gosh, I shouldn't contribute at all because my money's going to be trapped in there. Also, worst case scenario, the kid doesn't go, you don't transfer it to anyone, you don't need it, you can withdraw it. Of course, it's going to be counted as income tax, and you're going to pay a 10% penalty on the earnings, though, only on the earnings, not what you contributed, but it's not completely trapped. Like, yes, it's going to sting that you put money in there and then you had to pay income tax and 10% on the earnings, but it's not catastrophic, okay? It's not the ultimate worst case scenario. Yes, it's your money, yes, you can still access it. It's not like it's lost. So this is not like a use it or lose it kind of thing. There are a lot of options to extracting this money, even if your kid doesn't go to college or your kid isn't college bound. Okay, so I really want you to take that into consideration. I don't want you to rule out the 529 if that is a concern of yours. Plus, in other episodes, I talk about other ways that you can save towards college if you're totally against putting your money into the 529. So let's go back to what I was thinking, right? Because I said I opened this 529 for him pretty much at birth. Now, he's my second child. My first child, it took me a little bit longer to open the 529. I didn't know much about it. I knew that I wanted to save for college. I didn't get started quite as early for him. And so, of course, it took... there was less money in his than there was in the second child because there was more time in the market for the second child. So there was more money. Even if I was contributing the same amount, if there was more money left for him in the second one's 529 because he had more time in the market than the first one. So even though I had said, okay, yes, I'm going to contribute to the 529, remember the real estate that I said was going to be my backup plan? Well, I didn't need it. I didn't need to use it. I'm not going to need to use it. I don't need it for my firstborn. I'm not going to need it for my secondborn. So what happens to that real estate? Well, I love this option for me, and I'm not going to lie, because these properties are now part of generational wealth. This is a generational wealth transfer, right? And I'm going to transfer it in a way I haven't fully figured it out because they're still young, and I'm not quite sure about what their take may be on it. And I don't even know how it will be transferred. I mean, I may liquidate all these properties in a year and then it's like, oh, well, you get the cash. And they may get the cash. I don't know. But the point is, because I was planning for A with a backup plan of B, and I didn't use the backup plan of B, now B is going to be used as the first level of generational wealth transfer. Now, I also believe that the generational wealth transfer is providing them with an education that they don't have to pay for. I think that's huge. I didn't get that entirely, so I think that that is a huge generational wealth transfer. Coming out of school without student loans is a head start that a lot of people don't have, and it makes a world of difference. Going to school knowing that you don't have to pay for it, going to school knowing that you don't have to take summer jobs that just give you the money, but can actually give you an experience, that is really different. Coming out of school knowing you can take a job that allows for the experience as opposed to solely the money because you have student loans waiting to be paid. That is a generational wealth transfer. But in terms of actual assets, yes, these assets that I created because I was like, okay, this is part of my plan, a plan B, these assets can now be transferred. So all of that to be said, whether you're looking at a 529, whether you're thinking about generational assets, I want you to think through your college savings, your retirement savings. I want you to think about how do all of these assets come together to actually create the picture and the plan for yourself for years down the road. That's what I do with my clients. That's what I'm really good at with my clients, talking to them about what their goals are and then helping them understand the options that are available to them so that they actually make a plan and get started. I think when you have goals and you have targets and you're like, I don't know where to begin, that inertia that you need to get started is really difficult if you can't even envision what the next steps are going to be. And people use a lot of their energy thinking about what it is that they want to do, thinking that they should do something, thinking that they've got to get started, but they don't actually do it. And that time is what's being lost, right? When they could be growing their wealth. And so I want you to know that I am here and available if you have questions, if you want to take the next steps, if you are tired of just waiting. I never want people to have these regrets. I want you to know that once you get started and you have an efficient and effective plan, this actually comes together rather quickly. Quite quickly. I see it with my one-on-one clients every single week. I see it with my group. I see it with folks. It's just about knowing that there are options available to them, that they have somebody to talk to, somebody they can work with, somebody that's not going to waste their time, and somebody who's done what they actually want to do. I didn't arrive here by sitting on the sidelines and watching. Because we're talking about education right now, I ensured that I got the education I needed to build wealth. And I'm not talking about a formal education. I'm talking about reading all the books, listening to the news at the time. There wasn't social media. There weren't coaches. There weren't people available to me to answer my questions. And I think that's what's so very important. I'm answering your questions. Questions that you can't even formulate because you don't even know how to ask it. I can tell what you are asking me. I can tell that you don't understand something and that you want to ask the question, even if you don't know how to formulate it. I can extract what it is that you're saying, and there's no shame in that. Because there was a point too when I didn't understand what the heck was going on with all these different accounts and all these different modes of investing and saving and building wealth. I didn't understand it, but I do now. And through that lifelong learning venture, I have created significant wealth for myself and obviously for my offspring. All right. If you want help with this, if you have questions, whether it's about any part of your financial journey or how to even start your financial journey, then I want you to book a call with me. The link will be in the show notes, and I'll see you again next Thursday. Bye.